A millionaire faked a coma and overheard a nurse's confession that changed everything. The city's most powerful heir lies trapped in a silent battle for survival until a nurse's whispered confession changes everything. Betrayed by blood, abandoned by greed, Gideon Ashford's fight isn't just for his empire, it's for his life. But in a world built on deception, can trust still save him? Stay with us for this breathtaking story of survival betrayal and an unexpected love that defied every plan. Before we begin the story, leave a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our latest stories. Enjoy the story. The sterile chill of St. Augustine Medical Center clung to the air like an invisible mist. Everything was pristine, scrubbed to the point of lifelessness. White walls, white linens, white silence. In the middle of it all lay Gideon Ashford, heir to the Ashford dynasty, a man who had once negotiated billion-dollar mergers with the flick of a wrist. Now he was a figure frozen in time, the faint scar above his right eyebrow, the only visible sign of the crash that had nearly claimed his life along the winding roads of Napa Valley. To the outside world, Gideon had been unresponsive for 10 days. Physicians shook their heads in grim resignation. Newspapers speculated about succession plans, and family members swarmed like vultures around an empire too vast to crumble, but too tempting to resist. What none of them knew, what no one could even suspect, was that Gideon Ashford was fully awake, and he was listening. Outside, the thick hospital room door whispers crawled through the cracks. "The board is restless," came the voice of Vincent Ashford, Gideon's older cousin, whose designer suits and forced smiles masked a hunger older than blood itself. "They're ready to back me if you give the word. You worry too much." Eleanor Ashford, Gideon's stepmother, replied smoothly, her voice sharp as glass. "He's a breathing liability. We secure power now while he's helpless, or we risk losing everything. Trust me, Gideon's days of influence are over." Inside the room, Gideon's heart thundered against his ribs. So his suspicions had been correct. The accident was no twist of fate. It was a calculated play. They had failed to kill him, but now they intended to bury him alive in paperwork and power grabs. He had awoken 2 days after the accident, but chose to remain silent. He needed time to uncover his enemies, time to strategize Gideon. Ashford wasn't just a survivor. He was a tactician. And in the silent theater of this hospital room, the game was just beginning. The door clicked again, softer this time. Footsteps entered different from the brisk, predatory strides of his family. This was someone gentle, someone cautious. Gideon recognized that sound, the measured rhythm of Clara Hayes. "Good morning, Mr. Ashford." Clara said, her voice soft but steady. She didn't coo or coddle like the others. She moved around him with calm efficiency, adjusting monitors, straightening his covers, brushing a strand of unruly hair from his forehead. Her touch was clinical, but never cold. "I don't know if you can hear me," she said, seating herself beside him with a quiet sigh. "But I like to think you can." Gideon fought the urge to move to show her that he was listening, that he hung on to every syllable like a lifeline. "I didn't take this job for the money," Clara continued, voice dropping to a whisper. "I thought it would be just another short-term assignment. I thought maybe it would help me pay off some bills, get back on my feet." She paused. "But it's different here. I hear things I shouldn't. I see things no one talks about." She looked toward the door, checking that it was closed. then leaned in slightly. "They don't want you to wake up Mr. Ashford," she whispered. "I think they want you gone." A tear stung Gideon's eye, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming gut-punching knowledge that somewhere in this sterile, backstabbing world, someone still cared enough to be afraid for him. Clara's hand brushed his lightly, a fleeting contact that warmed his skin through layers of pretense. "I'm going to stay," she said, "as long as I can. I don't care if it costs me everything." She rose, smoothing her scrubs, and turned to leave. At the door, she paused. "Tonight I'll read to you something real, something they can't control." The door closed with a whisper, and Gideon for the first time in days allowed himself to hope. Night fell heavy over San Francisco, the city lights blinking distantly beyond the hospital's high windows. True to her word, Clara returned carrying a battered copy of The Old Man and the Sea. She pulled up a chair, settling in beside him, with a mug of herbal tea. "You probably think this book is silly," she said with a smile, "but it's about fighting battles you can't win, and doing it anyway." She read aloud, in a voice that wrapped around Gideon like a shield against the darkness. As she spoke, her hand brushed his wrist again, and he summoned every ounce of strength he had. A single twitch, a whisper of movement. Clara didn't notice not yet, but he would try again. He would fight, because if one nurse could risk everything for him, without ever knowing if he would wake, then Gideon Ashford would move heaven and earth to reclaim his life and protect her in return. And this was only the beginning. If you're captivated by Gideon and Clara's emotional journey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for the next parts. Their battle against betrayal and fight for redemption will only grow more powerful from here. The days passed in slow, heavy beats, each one marked by the rhythm of machines beeping softly in Gideon's room. To anyone watching, he was the same, still silent, unresponsive. But inside, Gideon was fighting a war of patience. Every night, Clara returned with a book or a story, and every night, he gathered whatever strength he had left to give her tiny, almost imperceptible signals. A twitch of a finger, a flicker beneath the eyelid. She was starting to notice. It was the fifth night when Clara leaned close after reading a few pages from The Old Man and the Sea, her voice low and certain. "If you can hear me, Gideon," she said, calling him by his first name for the first time, "give me a sign, anything." Her fingers rested lightly on his wrist. He summoned every ounce of willpower, every spark of life inside him. His pinky finger curled slightly just once. Clara gasped, recoiling slightly, before leaning in closer. "Gideon, was that you?" Again, a small movement, deliberate and slow. Tears filled her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away, scanning the monitors to ensure nothing alarming had triggered the motion. Everything was normal. This was real. This was him. Clara clutched his hand with both of hers trembling. "You're awake," she whispered. "You've been awake all along." In that moment, the vast loneliness that had wrapped around Gideon for weeks cracked open. He was no longer alone in his fight. Clara saw him, not just the man on the bed, but the man still fighting inside, and she believed in him. The next morning, Clara adjusted their routine. She acted normally when other staff were nearby, smiling politely, nodding to doctors and administrators. But when they were alone, she began working with him. She drew simple yes-no charts, taught him how to squeeze, once for yes, twice for no. She placed flashcards with common words at his bedside and encouraged him to move his eyes toward them. Slowly, Painstakingly, they built a fragile language. And Gideon learned something he hadn't expected: trust. Trust in someone who didn't want anything from him except to help him survive. Clara also began to dig deeper. She reviewed his medication logs late at night, comparing them against best practices she had studied in nursing school. She found alarming patterns: dosages that made no medical sense, consultations that never took place, orders signed by physicians who had never even visited Gideon's room. One evening, after the last rounds had been completed and the halls were empty, Clara slipped into Gideon's room with a determined look in her eyes. She pulled a small device from her scrubs, a tiny voice recorder she had hidden carefully. "I don't know how much you can move yet," she said softly, "but I need you to listen. And if you agree, just squeeze my hand once." She explained her plan. She would place the recorder in the medication cabinet where Vincent and Eleanor often met to discuss plans when they believed no one was listening. Clara had overheard enough to know they were planning to expedite Gideon's medical decline, forging a DNR to seal his fate without his consent. When she finished explaining, she slid her hand into his. A small squeeze answered her. She smiled, fierce and full of a hope that was slowly becoming steel. "We'll get them," she promised. "I swear to you." That night, while the hospital buzzed with the late-night hum of machines and occasional footsteps, Clara placed the recorder carefully behind a panel in the medication cabinet. Then she waited. 2 days passed. During that time, Clara kept careful watch. Vincent came twice, speaking in hushed tones about keeping things quiet and accelerating the plan. Eleanor visited, once her clipped voice speaking directly about the necessity of finalizing the legal paperwork before Gideon's inevitable decline. When Clara retrieved the recorder and played the audio back, her hands trembled. The evidence was undeniable. They had conspired to declare Gideon incompetent, assume control of his holdings, and quietly erase him from the empire he had built alongside his late father. Clara knew she had to act quickly. She couldn't trust anyone within the hospital administration. It was clear now that Vincent and Eleanor's influence ran deep. She needed someone outside, someone loyal to Gideon. That night, as she sat beside him, under the dim hospital lights, she whispered, "Gideon, I need your help. Who can we trust? Who is still loyal to you?" She laid out a basic alphabet chart on the bedside table and began slowly, letter by letter, helping him spell out names. It took 2 exhausting hours, but by the end, they had a single name: Ethan Carter, Gideon's personal attorney of over a decade, a man who had been mysteriously absent since the accident, but had always been fiercely protective of Gideon's interests. Clara nodded, committing the name to memory. "I'll find him," she said. "I promise." The next morning, while maintaining her perfect mask of professionalism for the other staff, Clara used her break to call Ethan Carter's office. She didn't leave a detailed message, only said it was urgent and about Gideon. Then she waited. By nightfall, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meet me tomorrow. Safe location. Don't tell anyone." Clara returned to Gideon's room, her heart pounding with a strange mixture of fear and hope. She leaned down and pressed her forehead lightly to his hand, her voice breaking into a soft whisper. "We're not alone anymore. Gideon," she said, "help is coming." And for the first time since the crash, Gideon Ashford allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he had a future waiting beyond the walls of this sterile prison. Clara arrived at the small cafe just off the edge of Central Park, her hands tucked deep in the pockets of her coat nerves, fluttering in her stomach. The text had been clear. No calls, no details, just meat. She scanned the room, heart pounding, until her eyes landed on a man seated at the back. A thick folder resting on the table in front of him. His hair was salt and pepper, his suit slightly rumpled, but there was a sharpness to his gaze that immediately told her he was the man she sought. Ethan Carter stood as she approached Clara Hayes. He asked, voice low but firm. "Yes," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "I'm here about Gideon." He didn't waste time. "Tell me everything. Start from the beginning." In hushed tones, Clara recounted the events of the past weeks. Gideon's coma, his covert communication, the forged medical records, the recording she had made of Vincent and Eleanor. Ethan listened without interruption, his face growing more grim with every word. When she finished, he leaned back, exhaling sharply. "I knew something wasn't right when I was pushed out. They blocked every attempt I made to see him, citing medical confidentiality. Now it makes sense." Clara felt a pang of guilt. "I'm sorry I didn't find you sooner." "You found me in time," he said, his eyes softening. "You may have saved his life." He tapped the folder. "I've been gathering documents for weeks, but without a clear sign, Gideon was aware it was impossible to act. Your recordings change everything. What do we do now?" she asked, feeling the full weight of the risk they were taking. Ethan's mouth set into a firm line. "We move fast. First, we file an injunction to freeze Gideon's assets, preventing Vincent and Eleanor from moving anything while we prepare a competency hearing. Second, we submit the audio as evidence. But most importantly," he leaned closer, "we have to protect him. They'll realize soon that something's wrong." Clara swallowed hard. "I won't leave him." "I didn't think you would," Ethan said with a small smile. "You're braver than most people I know." Later that evening, Clara sat beside Gideon once more. She held his hand in both of hers, whispering every development into the quiet of the room. His eyes, still only able to open, slightly, glistened with something fierce hope, a burning will to reclaim his life. The next few days blurred into a tense flurry of action. Ethan worked tirelessly, filing emergency motions, contacting trusted allies, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Meanwhile, Clara maintained the facade of the dutiful nurse, all while guarding Gideon like a hawk. But Vincent was growing suspicious. One afternoon, as Clara was adjusting Gideon's monitor, Vincent entered the room unannounced. His polished shoes clicked ominously against the tile floor. "How's our patient today?" he asked, a smile that didn't reach his eyes stretching across his face. Clara kept her expression neutral, stable. "No changes." Vincent stepped closer, too close, and peered down at Gideon. Still no signs of recovery. Such a shame. Clara said nothing, her hands steady as she logged false notes into the system. She could feel Gideon's tension through the faint twitch of his fingers beneath the blanket. He hated this charade as much as she did. Vincent's eyes flickered to Clara. "You've been working a lot of nights, haven't you? That's a lot of time alone with a patient who can't talk." She forced herself to meet his gaze calmly. "It's part of my job." Vincent studied her for a beat longer, then nodded slowly. "Of course. Just remember, it's not your job to get involved. We all have our place." Clara gave a polite smile and a nod, but inside she was trembling. She didn't relax until Vincent finally left the room. That evening, after the last rounds, Clara whispered urgently to Gideon, "We have to be ready. They're watching me now. I don't know how much time we have. Gideon twitched once for yes. He understood the stakes. The breaking point came 2 days later. Ethan called Clara in a rush. They're moving faster than we thought, he said. They filed for medical guardianship citing prolonged incapacitation and family best interest. We have to act now. Clara's heart raced when, tomorrow morning, court opens at 9 a.m. We'll need Gideon to make a statement. Anything. Even the smallest demonstration that he's conscious and competent. Clara hung up and turned to Gideon. The enormity of what they were about to attempt weighed heavily between them. Tomorrow, she said softly, squeezing his hand. Tomorrow, you fight for yourself. That night, she didn't leave his side. She pulled a cot into the corner of the room, set up a basic alphabet board on a stand, and rehearsed with him again and again. She would point to letters. He would blink once for yes, nothing for no. Together, they practiced spelling his name. Simple words like aware, alive, help. Clara knew the odds were against them. The court would be skeptical, and Vincent and Eleanor would use every resource at their disposal to maintain control. But they had the truth. And for the first time in weeks, the truth had a voice. Just before dawn, as the first pale light slipped through the hospital windows, Clara leaned in close to Gideon's ear. No matter what happens, you're not alone, she whispered. We're in this together. He managed a faint, deliberate squeeze of her hand. It was enough. They were ready. The courthouse loomed over them like a monument to uncertainty. Clara adjusted her scarf tighter around her neck, stealing a glance at Gideon as they stepped from the car. He sat upright in the wheelchair, his features calm, but focused the blanket draped over his lap, doing little to hide the tension vibrating through his frame. Ethan Carter walked beside them, his expression tight with concentration as he reviewed last-minute notes on his tablet. Inside the courtroom was already buzzing. Clara recognized some faces board members from the Ashford Empire, a few reporters pretending not to take notes, and at the front, Vincent and Eleanor seated side by side, projecting an image of stoic concern. But Clara knew better. She saw the flicker of panic in Eleanor's eyes the moment she spotted Gideon being wheeled into the room. Awake, alert, present. The judge, a woman named Marla Hastings, entered with a commanding presence, immediately calling the session to order. Ethan rose, first introducing Gideon and summarizing the emergency nature of their appeal. Your Honor, Ethan said, his voice steady, we contend that Mr. Gideon Ashford is fully aware, capable of making decisions regarding his own estate and care. Any reports suggesting otherwise were obtained without proper neurological evaluation, or we now believe under circumstances of manipulation. Vincent's lawyer objected immediately, arguing that Gideon's presence was a dangerous stunt exploiting his fragile condition. Clara watched as the judge silenced the room with a single lift of her hand. Ayukurirai. We will determine Mr. Ashford's competence by observation and evidence, not speculation, Judge Hastings said crisply. She turned her gaze to Gideon, who met her eyes unflinchingly. Clara's heart hammered in her chest as she prepared the alphabet board and placed it before him. She kneeled beside the wheelchair, holding the pointer. It had all come down to this. The judge leaned forward slightly. Mr. Ashford, can you hear me? Gideon blinked once, clearly, deliberately. And can you understand the nature of this hearing? Another firm blink. Clara guided the pointer over the board, stopping at each letter. Slowly, painstakingly, Gideon blinked at the right letters, forming the words, I am awake. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Hastings nodded, but her face remained inscrutable. Do you wish to make a statement today? The room held its breath as Gideon painstakingly spelled out, "My family tried to silence me." A collective gasp broke out among the spectators. Eleanor stiffened. Vincent shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Ethan stepped forward. Your Honor, if I may submit additional evidence. He handed a flash drive to the court clerk, who quickly loaded it onto the monitor facing the judge. The footage Clara had recorded played Vincent and Eleanor's whispered conversation about sedatives, about filing false medical directives, about removing obstacles. Judge Hastings watched the entire video without interruption. When it finished, she turned to Vincent and Eleanor, her expression unreadable. "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" she asked. Vincent stood smoothing his jacket. "Your Honor, those recordings were taken without consent. They cannot be considered credible evidence. They will be considered alongside the totality of evidence." Judge Hastings replied coolly, "And the court finds the content deeply concerning." Clara gripped Gideon's hand tighter, feeling the tension in his muscles. They were close, so close. The judge continued, her voice cutting through the thick silence. Given the evidence presented, including the video recording, Mr. Ashford's ability to communicate, and the clear indications of undue influence exerted by Mr. Vincent Ashford and Ms. Eleanor Ashford, the court hereby rules to restore full medical and legal autonomy to Mr. Gideon Ashford, effective immediately. Clara's breath caught in her throat. Furthermore, the judge added, her gaze sharpening, "I am ordering an independent investigation into the actions of Mr. Vincent and Ms. Eleanor Ashford should wrongdoing be confirmed. Further legal action will be pursued." The gavel came down sharply. It was done. Around them, the courtroom erupted into stunned whispers. Vincent looked as if he might lunge forward, but a bailiff stepped between him and Gideon's chair. Eleanor paled, clutching her designer purse like a lifeline. Clara watched them crumble and felt no pity. The weight of the past weeks crashed down on her all at once. Every long night, every whispered fear, every stubborn hope, it had all led to this moment. Gideon squeezed her hand, a small, tired smile curving his mouth. She smiled back, tears brimming, but unshed. As the courtroom cleared, Ethan clapped Gideon gently on the shoulder. "You did it," he said. "You fought back." Gideon rasped out a hoarse whisper only Clara could hear. "We did." Outside, the sun was just beginning to break through the heavy New York clouds, casting long golden shafts across the courthouse steps. Clara pushed Gideon's chair slowly down the ramp, Ethan walking ahead to flag down their car. Halfway to the curb, Gideon reached out and touched Clara's wrist, signaling her to stop. She turned, crouching down to meet his gaze. "What is it?" His voice was rough, almost broken, but his words were clear enough to steal her breath. "Stay with me." Clara blinked back the sudden sting of tears. She wanted to say 1,000 things. How much she cared, how terrified she was, how deeply this had changed her. But all she managed was a soft, shaky, "Of course." Gideon's smile, though faint, was the most real thing she had ever seen. They didn't need promises or grand declarations. They had already proven the only thing that mattered. When everything else crumbled, they had chosen each other. As the city swirled around them, indifferent and unknowing, Clara and Gideon moved forward together, not as patient and nurse, not as heir and employee, but as something far more fragile and infinitely more powerful. Two souls who had fought their way back to life and found home in one another. Weeks passed, and the rhythm of Gideon's new life began to form in small, meaningful ways. Physical therapy sessions filled his mornings, each one a brutal test of will that he embraced with a quiet ferocity. Clara was there through it all, steady, patient, and tireless. In the afternoons, they would sit on the terrace of Gideon's brownstone overlooking Central Park, where the noise of the city softened into something almost like peace. Gideon still used the wheelchair most of the time, but strength was returning to his limbs. His voice, though rough, grew stronger with each passing day, and with every milestone, a step taken with trembling legs, a conversation carried without gasps for breath. Clara was beside him, a silent anchor against the uncertainty. One evening, as the sky blazed pink over Manhattan, Gideon sat watching Clara carefully transplant small flowers into the terrace planters. It was a task she had started casually claiming. The plants needed better soil. But Gideon knew it was more than that. It was her way of giving life to a place that had once been all stone and shadow. "You could have left," he said, voice still scratchy but steady. Clara glanced over her shoulder, smiling slightly. "I could have," she agreed, "but you didn't." She pressed the soil down around a small hydrangea, wiping her hands on her jeans before turning to face him fully. "You didn't give up on yourself, Gideon," she said softly. "I wasn't about to be the one who did." Silence stretched between them. Not the awkward kind, but the kind that felt like a bridge being built, plank by plank. "Stay," he said, more a plea than a command. Clara dropped her gaze, brushing dirt from her palms. "You know I can't be your nurse anymore. I'm not asking you to be." Her breath hitched slightly, the evening breeze catching her hair and lifting it around her face like a halo. Slowly, carefully, Gideon wheeled closer. "I don't need a nurse." He continued, his voice low and certain. "I need you." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away fiercely. "I'm scared," she whispered. "We built this in crisis. What if it all falls apart when life gets normal again?" Gideon smiled faintly, a smile forged from brokenness and rebuilt with something stronger. "Then we rebuild it again? Together." Clara let out a shaky laugh, wiping her cheek. "You're really bad at making things sound simple. You know that." "I'm terrible at it," he agreed. "But I'm good at fighting for things that matter." She stepped forward, and he reached for her hand. For a long moment, they just stood there, the city humming softly behind them, the scent of fresh earth and new blooms between them. Finally, Clara leaned down and pressed her forehead against his. "Okay," she whispered. "We'll figure it out." It wasn't a dramatic confession or a sweeping kiss. It was something better, something real. In the months that followed, Gideon's return to the world was both celebrated and scrutinized. Public statements were carefully crafted by Ethan's team, revealing just enough to satisfy curiosity without exposing the rawness of what had happened. Vincent and Eleanor faced mounting legal troubles, stripped of their influence, their names becoming warnings rather than legacies. Gideon, for his part, didn't rush back into the family business. Instead, he restructured Ashford Holdings, delegating day-to-day operations and focusing instead on a new initiative, the Ashford Foundation for Patient Advocacy. The first donation, made quietly and without press, went to funding whistleblower protection programs in hospitals across the country. Clara returned to nursing, but not in a traditional setting. With Gideon's encouragement, she helped establish outreach clinics focused on ethical patient care, places where no one would ever be forgotten or neglected the way Gideon had almost been. Their relationship grew slowly, deliberately. There were awkward moments, hard conversations, setbacks that left them both raw and exposed. But there was laughter, too. Deep startled laughter at bad movies, at burnt dinners, at inside jokes no one else would understand. One rainy afternoon, almost a year to the day, after Gideon first opened his eyes, they returned to the courthouse not for another battle, but to finalize the adoption of a small, brown and white terrier puppy Clara had fallen in love with at a rescue shelter. As they stepped back onto the sidewalk, the rainlight and misty Clara tugged Gideon's hand. "You know," she said, grinning up at him. "I never imagined my life turning out this way." He squeezed her fingers. "Neither did I. And you're okay with that." He smiled the kind of smile that only came from surviving things you thought would break you. "I'm more than okay with it. I'm grateful for it." She leaned into him, the umbrella tilting as they both got a little wetter, not caring. "I am too." On Patsawark. Later that night, as they sat curled up together in Gideon's library, the puppy asleep between them and the city stretching out beyond the windows, Gideon whispered something into Clara's hair. "You didn't just save my life," he said. "You gave me one I actually want to live." She didn't answer with words. She didn't have to, because some promises aren't made with grand speeches or ceremonies. Some promises are made in the quiet, in the staying, in the choosing, again and again. And for Gideon Ashford and Clara Hayes, it was a choice they would make every single day. In the end, Gideon Ashford's journey was never just about reclaiming his empire. It was about rediscovering what truly mattered. Betrayed by those closest to him and left to battle for his life in silence, Gideon learned that wealth and power could vanish in a heartbeat. But human connection, genuine, unwavering loyalty, was what could rebuild a soul torn apart. It was Clara Hayes, the woman who saw the man behind the fortune, who sat beside him in the quietest moments, refusing to give up on him even when the world had already moved on. In her presence, Gideon found not just healing, but hope, a reason to fight back, not out of anger, but out of love for the life he still had a chance to live. Their story reminds us that survival isn't measured by strength alone. It's measured by the small moments, the silent hand held through the dark, the whispered encouragement when hope falters, the steadfast belief that even the most broken hearts can beat again. Gideon didn't win his battle because he had the most influence or the sharpest mind. He won because he dared to trust someone when trust seemed like the greatest risk of all. Clara, with nothing but courage and kindness, proved that one voice, one soul willing to care, could tip the scales against even the most formidable odds. The lesson from Gideon and Clara's story is profound and timeless. True power lies not in titles, money, or status. It lies in compassion, in the willingness to stand by another human being when no one else will. In a world often driven by ambition and self-interest, their bond is a powerful reminder that love, loyalty, and quiet bravery can change not just a single life, but ripple outward to impact many more. Applying this lesson to our own lives means choosing to be present for others, even when it's inconvenient, standing up for what's right, even when it's unpopular, and believing in the good of people, even when disappointment has taught us otherwise. It's about recognizing that sometimes the smallest act of faith can become someone else's entire lifeline. Now, we would love to hear from you. What part of Gideon and Clara's journey touched you the most? Which lesson will you carry into your own life after hearing their story? Please share your thoughts in the comments below so we can reflect and grow together. If you enjoyed this emotional journey and want to be part of a community that values heartfelt, meaningful stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Your support fuels us to keep bringing you more inspiring tales that stir the soul and remind us all what it truly means to be human. See you in the next story.